The sun was unforgiving that afternoon, gleaming off the windshields of luxury vehicles parked like trophies at Blackwell Motors. Laughter cracked the air like a whip. "Tell you what, old man," Jonathan Blackwell said, flipping his designer sunglasses up with a smirk. "I'll give you the Ferrari, if you can make it run." The crowd chuckled. A few salesmen pulled out their phones. One even started recording. In the far corner of the courtyard sat a wrecked 2019 red Ferrari, caved-in panels, scorched engine housing, more sculpture than car now. Jonathan treated it like wall art, a monument to a lawsuit he'd won against some rich kid racer. Walter Johnson didn't flinch. The 72-year-old had only shown up to pick up his granddaughter Rebecca, who worked the front desk. His old Ford pickup had stalled right in front of the dealership's arched gates. He'd barely gotten out when the taunts started. "Look at that beauty," Jonathan continued, gesturing to the heap of twisted red metal. 5 certified mechanics said it's unfixable. Burned wiring, bent frame, blown engine. And yet, he waved theatrically toward Walter. "We've got a real pro here today. The man, the myth, the roadside Ford whisperer." More laughter. Walter's face remained unreadable. He stepped forward quietly, boots dusty, work shirt half sun faded. He didn't carry a phone, or wear a watch, or speak louder than necessary. "Sir," he said softly, nodding at the Ferrari. "May I take a closer look?" Jonathan snorted. "Be my guest. Just don't cut yourself on the metal. I'd hate to file a report." Someone in the crowd muttered, "This is going to be good." As Walter walked toward the wreck, a hush fell over the group. Something about the way he moved, slow, precise, felt wrong for the moment, like he wasn't humiliated at all. He placed one hand gently on the warped hood, brushing away a patch of dust. The metal was hot under his fingers. His eyes didn't blink as he scanned the angles, the warps, the screws. He didn't ask questions. He didn't explain. He just studied. That's when Ryan, the lead salesman, shouted, "Hey, Pops, my dad owns a bike shop downtown. You want me to get you an application when this falls apart?" Uproar. Walter didn't even turn. Inside the dealership, a few customers who had wandered out for the show began posting hashtags. "Old Man vs. Ferrari, UNDAC Mechanic Madness." Jonathan leaned against a black Mercedes, recording it all on Instagram Live. "He's still going," he laughed. "Almost 10 minutes of poking around. I gotta admire the commitment." But he didn't notice what a few others had started to see. Walter's fingers weren't random. They moved with familiarity. His eyes stopped on precise points. His hands, calloused, yes, were gentle in a way that didn't match the jokes being thrown at him. He wasn't trying. He was remembering. The laughter didn't stop, but it grew, thinner now. People were still watching, still filming, still posting hashtags. But something about the old man's hands made a few of them go quiet. He wasn't fumbling. He wasn't guessing. Walter Johnson had already opened the crumpled hood and removed the shattered control panel like he'd done it 100 times before. His fingertips moved with calm precision, each gesture firm but fluid, like a conductor leading an invisible orchestra. A silence began to settle, creeping in at the edges of the crowd. It was unsettling. Jonathan Blackwell didn't like that. He stepped forward, still holding his phone, voice high. 30 minutes in, ladies and gentlemen, and he still thinks this engine is just asleep." A few chuckles, a weak smattering of claps. "Man's got guts," someone whispered behind a camera. "Or maybe he's just lost his mind." Walter said nothing. His brow was steady, his eyes moving line to line inside the wreck like he was reading a book only he could understand. It wasn't performance. It was memory. He was remembering how it had been built, and how it had been broken. Inside the showroom, the receptionist's desk stood empty. Rebecca Johnson had gone to lunch 20 minutes earlier, unaware of the spectacle her grandfather had become. And Jonathan, he was loving it. especially because no one had recognized the old man. No pressure, no accountability, just free humiliation. "Is this still live?" Ryan asked, leaning over Jonathan's shoulder. "Of course," Blackwell grinned. 200,000 people waiting for the punchline. "Watch, I'll give them something." He raised his voice again, smirk widening. "You know what I love most about this guy? The confidence. Look at him, like he actually knows what he's doing." The audience laughed again, but two salesmen, junior guys barely in their 20s, weren't laughing anymore. They'd noticed the way Walter had separated the melted wiring with the back of his hand, preserving key components from further damage. They'd seen him pull a twisted bolt from the axle without checking a diagram. And now, they were watching him sketch something with his fingertip in the dust on the engine block. A diagram? A sequence? "Hey, is that standard procedure?" one of them murmured. "Dude, I don't even know what he's doing," the other replied, "but it doesn't look random." Ryan, still feeling bold, stepped closer. "Yo, Pops, if this whole thing flops, I can get you a job at my dad's shop. We fix lawnmowers and bicycles, but we pay on time." More laughter. Walter didn't even blink, because at 72, he didn't have anything to prove, and real builders don't talk while they work. They let the results speak for them. His hands were now deep inside the wreck, navigating blind, as if he knew where every screw lived before he touched it. Then, finally, he paused. "Mr. Blackwell," Walter said, eyes still, fixed on the engine. "May I ask you something?" Jonathan froze. "Excuse me?" "Have you ever built anything with your own hands?" Walter asked, now raising his head, slowly, until his gaze met the billionaire's face. "Something that lived first in your mind, and then in the world. Because of your work?" The question cracked like a cold breeze through the crowd. Jonathan stuttered. I built a real estate empire." "No," Walter interrupted quietly. "That's not building. That's buying." The silence that followed was brutal. Not angry, not aggressive, just honest. Even the laughter stopped. A beat, 2 beats. Then Walter reached forward without needing to look and tugged a melted relay free from the harness. With his other hand, he tapped 2 wires, traced one backwards to the root, and then nodded softly to himself. "Phillips head," he said calmly. "Number 2. Insulated handle." Ryan blinked. "What?" "In drawer 3, Walter said. "Red bench, second shelf, next to the Torx keys." Every head turned toward the workshop. Ryan didn't move. "Go on," Walter said, voice patient. "They haven't changed your layout in 10 years, right?" Ryan swallowed and jogged off. Blackwell's smile had vanished. "Who is this guy?" someone whispered. Another person stopped their live stream. They weren't here for laughs anymore. Something was shifting, and no one, not even Blackwell, could explain how this stranger knew exactly where the right tools were, in a dealership he'd never stepped foot in. Just then, Rebecca returned from lunch. She stopped short at the edge of the crowd, eyes scanning the phones, the murmurs, the shocked faces. Then she saw her grandfather, beneath the hood, surrounded by people, and in that moment, her blood ran cold. She knew Blackwell's games, his cruelty, how he loved finding a weak target and turning them into entertainment. And she knew her grandfather, which meant she also knew exactly what was coming next. Rebecca pushed her way through the crowd, heartbeat pounding in her ears. She hadn't told anyone she was Walter Johnson's granddaughter, not when she first got the job, not when Blackwell made those sly remarks about old mechanics who think carburetors still matter. She'd stayed quiet, safe. But now her grandfather stood in the center of it all, surrounded by phones, laughter, tension, and a Ferrari in pieces. "What's going on here?" she demanded, forcing her way to the front. Blackwell turned toward her, smug as ever. "Ah, one of our own. Your friend here," he gestured dramatically to Walter, "thinks he can repair a Ferrari that 5 certified mechanics declared dead. You've got yourself a bold guest." Rebecca froze. Her eyes flicked to Walter's hands, deep in the engine's housing, and back to Blackwell's mocking face. He didn't know. He had no idea who he was laughing at. And Rebecca didn't dare say it out loud. Not yet. Not in front of all these people. Not if it meant her job. So she stayed silent. She trusted her grandfather. Walter, meanwhile, had already removed the last damaged plate from the ignition system. He didn't speak. He didn't grandstand. He didn't need to. But his silence made people nervous. Too calm. Too confident. Someone in the crowd leaned in and whispered, "He's done this before." Another voice, "Those aren't the hands of a hobbyist." Walter finally looked up. "This engine," he said to no one in particular, "wasn't destroyed by accident." The crowd murmured. Jonathan chuckled. But there was a stiffness to it now. "Sabotage, is it? What a dramatic theory." Walter kept his eyes on the engine. No theory, just facts. He lifted a wire, burned at the end. The plastic melted into the copper. This cut was made with a flat-edge blade, then scorched to mimic heat damage. And this? He tapped a gear etched with unnatural striations. Forced twist, manual brake lock, precise, intentional. People edged closer. Even the ones who had been filming out of boredom now leaned in like schoolchildren around a campfire. "You can't prove that," Blackwell barked, louder than necessary. Walter finally turned. "I already have." He removed a metal plate bolted to the side of the engine block. It was blackened, but the serial number still glinted beneath the dust. F209, WJ447. He turned it to the crowd. "WJ, Walter Johnson. That's not a coincidence." A beat. A full second of stunned silence. Then Rebecca's voice broke through, quiet but firm. He built that engine." Gasps. Actual gasps. Blackwell took a step back. "That's impossible." Rebecca stepped forward now, no longer afraid. "My grandfather worked for Ferrari's racing division in Maranello for 45 years. He didn't just fix these engines. He created them." Walter looked up, face calm but eyes sharp. "I personally designed this unit in March 2019. Its specs, its tolerances, its safety features, including one meant to prevent exactly this kind of failure." Blackwell's skin went pale. "How do you even know it's the same engine?" he whispered. Walter smiled gently. Not to mock, but because he already knew how this ended. "Because when you spend your life creating something by hand, you can recognize your own work, even in the wreckage." More phones came out, but this time no one was laughing. They were documenting something else entirely now. Not a humiliation. A reckoning. Walter wiped his hands with a rag and reached into his pocket. He pulled out his phone and tapped a single message. "To whom?" someone asked. "To Ferrari," he said, then paused. "More specifically, to the man currently running the engineering department in Maranello." Blackwell's voice cracked. "You know him?" Walter didn't answer. His phone rang. He put it on speaker. "Walter," came a strong Italian accent. "Dio mio, I just saw your photos. Questo è impossibile. That engine, it was designed for Blackwell, no?" Walter looked up slowly, meeting Jonathan's gaze as the line echoed across the dealership. "Exactly my question, Lorenzo," he said. The moment the Italian voice echoed through the speakerphone, the entire dealership courtyard fell silent. "Walter, Dio mio, I just saw your photos. That engine, it was designed for Blackwell, no?" Jonathan's jaw twitched. Walter stood unmoved, phone balanced in his hand, voice steady. "Exactly my question, Lorenzo." A long pause. Even those still filming lowered their phones slightly. No one wanted to miss a second. "Especially," Walter added, "considering this engine includes a failsafe I personally built, designed to prevent the very type of malfunction that supposedly caused this Accident. Blackwell took a step forward, panic breaking through his smile. What is this? What the hell are you doing? Walter didn't answer. He turned slightly, letting the phone broadcast clearly. Walter, my friend. Lorenzo's voice grew serious. Are you recording this? I need this for Ferrari's legal department. That vehicle was insured under a high-performance policy. If you're saying the engine was sabotaged, I'm not saying it, Walter replied. I'm proving it. Blackwell lunged forward, arm outstretched toward the phone. Walter calmly sidestepped him like he'd expected it. There's more, he said, voice cool. He looked directly at Blackwell now. Not angry, not triumphant. Just finished. The current owner claims 5 different mechanics declared the engine irreparable. Correct? Jonathan stammered. That's right. Certified shops. Ridiculous, Lorenzo snapped through the phone. That engine was built to last 500,000 kilometers without failure. If it's deemed beyond repair, then either they're incompetent or lying. A low gasp rolled through the crowd. Ryan, the young salesman, paled. He looked at Rebecca, who didn't look away this time. Then Walter took one slow step forward, and everything changed. He turned to Rebecca and said, loudly and clearly, "Granddaughter, do you still work here?" Blackwell blinked. "Grand!" Rebecca stepped forward. "For 2 years." His face went blank. "You never said—" "And in those 2 years," she continued, "I've heard everything you say about people like my grandfather. About how you think knowledge comes from certificates. Or suits." Walter's voice cut through again, soft but iron-bound. "For 45 years, I designed Ferrari engines," he said, addressing the crowd now. 847 models, 23 international awards, hundreds of engineers trained under me. And I retired, not because I was tired, but because my family mattered more than titles. He held up the damaged fuel injection system in his hand. This part was destroyed with a precise overheating technique, 40% above safe temperature, sustained for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, long enough to cause permanent damage, short enough to mimic a fluke. The techs watching turned to each other in stunned silence. That wasn't guesswork. That was insider knowledge. "This wasn't an accident," Walter continued. "This was engineered, just like the insurance claim was, just like the lie." Blackwell's voice cracked. You can't prove Actually," Walter said, lifting his phone, "I can." He turned the screen toward the nearest camera filming. "I recorded our entire conversation, including your joke about the $2.3 million payout, and your admission that the engine was never supposed to run again." Jonathan Blackwell's face collapsed. Not physically, but everything behind it, the certainty, the arrogance, the untouchability, shattered in real time. And then the Ferrari engine roared to life. Loud, pure, flawless. The very engine 5 professionals had called dead. And the sound that ripped through the courtyard wasn't just mechanical. It was judgment. It was truth. And it left the man who'd tried to mock Walter Johnson standing in complete, public silence. 3 weeks later, Walter Johnson sat in a windowless FBI office in downtown Los Angeles. The same man who had once stood quietly in a dealership courtyard now watched federal agents spread dozens of documents across a steel table. Photos, blueprints, insurance records, engine diagnostics, phone logs, all of it tied to one name, Jonathan Blackwell. Agent Martinez adjusted her glasses and looked over at Walter. "Mr. Johnson, your technical analysis was the breakthrough. You weren't just exposing a lie about a Ferrari. You uncovered a pattern of fraud across 5 years, 17 luxury vehicles, all totaled, all insured, all—" she tapped a paper, "sabotaged the same way." Walter nodded. No celebration, no smirk, just quiet confirmation. At 72, he had nothing left to prove. But now the world finally understood what his silence had been hiding all along. Across town, Jonathan Blackwell was not sitting in a room voluntarily. He had been arrested the morning before, resisting, of course, trying to bribe the arresting officer with a suitcase full of cash. He'd failed, and now he faced multiple counts: fraud, obstruction, bribery, insurance crimes, and possibly more. His accounts were frozen, his assets seized, his empire shattered. The man who once laughed in a courtyard now sat behind bars, watching his legacy unravel across every screen in America. Because the video, it went viral. 15 million views, across every platform. But it wasn't the humiliation that people shared. It was the moment Walter said, "That's not building, that's buying." It was the moment the engine came alive. It was the moment a soft-spoken black engineer revealed he had designed the very machine everyone assumed he didn't understand. That video cracked something deep in society. It wasn't just about cars. It was about judgment, dignity, prejudice, precision, and how all of it could flip in one perfect moment of truth. Back at the dealership, change came fast. Blackwell Motors was sold to new investors within 10 days of his arrest. The brand was toxic. No one wanted to be associated with it. But what the buyers did next shocked everyone. They renamed it Johnson Premium Motors. And they didn't stop there. They promoted Rebecca Johnson, the front desk girl, to general manager. Because she hadn't just been a witness. She had been the bridge between two worlds. Young and old, disrespected and brilliant, invisible and unforgettable. Now she was in charge. The Ferrari. It sat in the center of the showroom now, fully restored. A glass case surrounded it with a small plaque that read, "The man who built it, then proved it, still had value." Customers came from other cities just to take pictures. Children walked past it with awe. And behind the counter, every employee had been trained to answer when asked what happened here that day. Because this wasn't just a dealership anymore, it was a monument. To the man who refused to raise his voice, to the engine that refused to die, to the truth that refused to stay buried. 6 months later, the garage behind Walter Johnson's modest home buzzed with quiet energy. But it wasn't the sound of engines anymore. It was laughter, focused silence, the hum of curiosity. A new generation had found him. Young men and women, some just teenagers, some in their 20s, sat cross-legged beside disassembled car frames, scribbling notes, watching the steady rhythm of his hands. They weren't here because of the viral video. They were here because they saw what real strength looked like. Marcus, 17, was the most dedicated of them all. He'd shown up the day after the Ferrari story exploded online. He hadn't said much, just stood outside the gate until Walter finally looked up from his work and said, "You want to learn? Then start by listening." And he had, every day since. Now, as the garage glowed in the soft gold of a California evening, Marcus stood beside Walter wiping grease from his fingers. "Mr. Johnson," he asked, "how did you stay calm when that man tried to humiliate you?" Walter looked up, smiled, and answered the way only someone who had truly earned peace could. "Son, people who need to put others down to feel powerful have already shown you everything you need to know about them. Real strength? It's not about proving them wrong. It's about building something so strong. Their opinions can't break it." Meanwhile, far from the garage, another life had taken a very different turn. Jonathan Blackwell sat in a cold prison cell. He had lost everything: the empire, the cars, the mansion. But what haunted him most wasn't what he lost. It was what the world saw. Over and over, the moment he laughed, the moment he mocked, the moment the engine roared to life, and he was left standing speechless, outsmarted by the man he'd called old. His downfall became a business school case study on ego, classism, and the cost of underestimating someone with calloused hands. But Walter wasn't finished building. Ferrari didn't just honor him. They launched the Walter Johnson Scholarship, a full-ride program for underprivileged youth with mechanical talent. 10 students in the first class, then 20, then 50, Within a year, they'd expanded it to cover not just automotive engineering, but also aeronautical, naval, and renewable energy design. Donations poured in from around the world, not for Ferrari, but for Walter, because his story had struck a nerve in people tired of seeing quiet brilliance ignored. And one quiet morning, as Walter swept the floor of his garage before class, Rebecca walked in holding an envelope. "From Italy," she said, handing it to him. Inside was a single letter, written by hand, from Jonathan Blackwell. The words were clean. No excuses, no manipulation, just remorse. He had finally understood that true wealth wasn't power or money or reputation. It was respect, the kind earned by what you create and how you carry yourself. Walter didn't reply right away, but when he finally wrote back, he ended his letter with just 2 sentences. The first step is acknowledging the damage. The second is devoting your life to repairing it, with actions, not words. On the 1-year anniversary of the engine's revival, the new Johnson Premium Motors held its grand reopening. The mayor came. Ferrari's legal team came. Reporters came. But it wasn't Walter who stood at the podium. It was Marcus, now accepted into the California Institute of Technology, with a full scholarship. And as he looked out over the crowd, his voice cracked just slightly as he said, "Everything I know about precision, patience, and power, I learned from a man the world once called a nobody. He taught me that greatness doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being unshakably true to who you are." And in the back of the crowd, Walter Johnson stood quietly, hands in his pockets, smiling, because he hadn't just fixed an engine, he'd rebuilt a future.